All right, one last thing I want to cover in this topic of lists has to do with merging those with for loops. So we covered for loops in the previous segment, but to help visualize what's going on, I'm actually going to go and shift gears a little bit here. So this is the program that we have written out here. And it's really helpful to visualize what exactly is going on here if you employ the use of a nice little table. So we'll make a table here, and then all the relevant values will have a column dedicated to that. So we'll have one column dedicated to our looping variable, which is I, another column dedicated to mylist bracket I, and we'll see the significance of that very shortly, and also this variable x, which is contained within the loop here. So when the loop first begins, it assumes the very first value in the range here. So I is going to start off at 0 and then go up to, but not including len mylist. Remember, len function gives you a number back. That's all it does. Len mylist, and we established earlier this list has 9 entries. So this essentially, the computer is going to essentially automatically fill in this upper bound of the loop with the value 9. So this in essence is going to be the same thing as for I in range 0, 9. So I is going to start at 0 and then stop at 8. Remember, that upper bound is not inclusive. So I starts off as 0. So we fill that entry into our table here. And what's the value of mylist bracket I? Well, the value of I is 0. So the computer is automatically going to put that 0 inside the brackets here. So that's going to give us mylist bracket 0, which means give us the 0th entry, or entry number 0 in my list, which is defined up here, and that in fact corresponds to this 3. So this whole thing, mylist bracket I, essentially becomes 3 based on the logic that we just employed. And this entire thing is 3. If we take that 3 and then multiply it by 2, that should give us a value of 6, which gets put into this variable x here. So we can put that in our column x. So the result I get back from this is just a regular number that we can do math on like we would any other number. So 3 times 2 is of course 6, and that'll be stored in our variable x here. And then we'll print out whatever mylist bracket I is. Then we will go to the next cycle in the loop. So I increases by 1. So I is now 1. Now what's mylist bracket I? Well, now I is 1. So the computer is going to put the value of I in the brackets here, which is this 1. So that's going to give us mylist bracket 1, which means look up entry number 1 in my list, which is in fact this 1 here. So this column is going to be a 1. And if we take that result, mylist bracket I, and take the result of 1, multiply it by 2, we get our value for x here, which is going to be 2. Now, the reason why I'm doing this with the variable x is to show you that you can do math with these entries that you're accessing like you would anything else. In the past, when I've taught programming classes, there's been some confusion about surrounding this print statement here. There's some misconception that for some reason you can't separate this from the print statement, but that is in fact not the case. You can separate that from the print statement, and that's demonstrated in what we have on this expression here, where x is equal to mylist bracket I multiplied by 2. So take whatever result we get back from this, multiply it by 2, and then store that result in x. And if we continue on through the loop, in fact, if you want to, go ahead and pause the video just to sort of check your understanding and try and fill out the rest of this table. So I'll give you a few minutes to work through that exercise. So now we'll have a chance to hopefully check your results or check your attempt, and hopefully it looks something like this. So the next cycle through the loop, I is going to be 2. Mylist bracket 2 is going to be this 4. And then 4 times 2 is going to give us a value of 8 for x. And then when I is equal to 3, which is the next cycle through the loop, we get this 1 out of the list. And then we take that 1, multiply it by 2, and we get a value of 2 for x. Now we go to the next cycle in the loop when I is equal to 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That'll give us this 5. And that goes in that column, and when we take the 5, multiply it by 2, that'll give us a value of x. And you'll notice how x changes every time we go through the loop. So again, this kind of goes back to what I said in the very first segment, where if you want to keep information separate, you have to use separate variable names. Notice how the value of x changes every time we go through the loop. So x holds on to just a single value every time, and that value changes every time the loop goes through, and that's because we don't have a separate variable dedicated to the result that we get back here. It's the same variable, so that old value is going to be continually replaced by the new value every time the loop runs. And we go through the loop again, we get I is equal to 5. We plug the 5 into the brackets to get this 9. That 9 multiplied by 2 gives us a value of 18 for x. And then when I is equal to 6, we get this 2. We take that 2, multiply it by 2 to get a value of 4 for x. And finally, when I is equal to 7, that gives us the 6. 6 times 2 is equal to 12. That goes in x. So x is 12 when we go through this cycle of the loop. And then last but certainly not least, I is equal to 8. Remember, it does not go up to 9. It stops at 8. So this is going to be the last cycle through the loop. I will be 8. And then accessing item number 8 out of my list is going to give us this 5. Then taking that result, multiplying by 2 will give us a value of 10 for x. And that's what we would get if we were to run this program. So let's go ahead and do that and see if we, in fact, get that result. So first I'm just going to run this through and print out what my list I is going to be. So we should expect something that appears, that resembles a table, and you see we do, in fact, get that result. Now I'll print out what the value of x is. You can see every time, x is, in fact, assuming a new value every time the loop runs. So that's going to do it for lists, and that's going to do it for this segment. And in the next segment, we'll take a look at arrays, which function a lot like lists, but there are a few subtle differences that we will highlight, and those differences can actually make our life easier. But we'll save that for the next segment. And with that, I will see you in the next segment.